Okay, basically we are pretty much at the end of the stabilization of the previous milestone, the 4.2.4.0 release, and we're already starting to look at the future stories, future tasks. We went through the stories, reviewed them yesterday. I added some comments to all the stories in the next milestone that we have, specifying the tasks that can be created, and I have already started creating some tasks for the stories that are ready. Right now we have some good first issues up for grabs. But some stories did brought some questions. I guess the questions were mostly based on the missing mock-ups.
Sergey, did you have a chance to explain what is the purpose of next milestone and what we're trying to achieve?
Generally, on the public meeting, probably no. So you can
okay.
do this.
Yeah, I mean, just for kind of general understanding why we are having another milestone and what is the objective of this milestone, maybe it would be helpful to cover that a bit.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so and we kind of agreed to have very, very granular and iterative approach in achieving that goal, but essentially the high-level goal that we have in mind is enable user in admin panel do the transformation with images and create renditions and assign these image renditions to different breakpoints that are used on the particular website. And the way, Sergey, can you share the roadmap if you have it handy?
Yes, sure. Give me a second.
So it's kind of big long-term goal, and in order to be truly agile, we agreed to split that phase into smaller iterations within the phase. So we have some deliverable functionality after each iteration. So in the first, we are looking at the phase 5 at the moment. So within this first iteration, it will be possible to programmatically, without user input, generate the image renditions based on the parameters that user provided in a configuration. And these parameters will be used for all of the images that are inserted into the content. So let's say as a user, I have 2 breakpoints that my website supports, and I want to use on my desktop breakpoint images with no more than 1060 pixels width, and on my mobile breakpoint, I want to use images no more than, let's say, 1200 pixels width, and I provide such kind of configuration. And this is the kind of general rule that Magento will be using to kind of process the images and compress them to match these rules that user provided in a configuration. So when, as a user, I insert the image into the content, I don't need to specify the width and other parameters of the image. I just insert this image normally as I used to before. But Magento makes sure that this is an image that is optimized to the certain breakpoint based on their configuration provided previously. Does this make sense?
Sorry to interrupt you here. Yeah, so basically the phase 5 is dedicated to renditions, but the next phase is phase 4 for us at this moment of time. Hi, Eugene. Elena, are you here?
Yeah, you were interrupting a bit, so I missed what you were saying. At least for me, maybe it's on my side.
Yeah, you disappeared for a couple of seconds, some network problems. So I said that currently we are looking into phase 4, because that's the next phase for us. We just finished the phase 3, and right now we were just on our plan and we were focusing on the first iteration on phase 4. Yeah, for sure.
Got it. I jumped ahead a bit, right?
All the renditions. Yeah, by the way, we went through all the I guess all the phases on the previous meeting a bit, just to took a look on the stories, but we are starting to try to groom in details the iteration 1 right now on the phase 4.
Got it. Okay.
So that's an extension of existing functionalities. Right? A bit more functionality for Justin and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. So phase 4 is more like a completion of the media gallery basic functionality that we already started in phase 3. So we are planning to add like various features listed here, but the main goal of the phase 4 is provide the ability for the user in the media gallery to find assets that are used in the different areas of Magento. So let's say I want to find all of the images that are used in CMS pages, or I want to find images that are used in CMS pages created in a certain period of time, or I want to find images on CMS pages on a certain store view. So with that, there will be ability also to find images that are not used anywhere. That kind of helps to understand the level of usage of assets that are in the media gallery and maybe do the cleanup if needed. So this is like the big objective for the phase 4, to provide that visibility that we never had in Magento.
Yeah, and by the way, this story during the review raised the most questions, probably the stories. Currently, I see only 2 stories in our backlog. That's for block, dynamic blocks, and for pages. Are we supposed to cover the catalog content part as well? I mean, the categories products, or that's for later? So
for products, we can cover only like a content area again, right? Because WYSIWYG can be used only in, WYSIWYG images can be used only in the content section of the image. That's why I kind of prioritize that lower, but we can discuss that because I see that like lifestyle images are used much less in the product content versus the CMS area. So that's why it's more important to focus on CMS area first and add their like catalog area support later. But I believe on a roadmap, I have that story, like a bullet item. I just didn't create like the issue on the GitHub.
Can see it. But anyway, yeah, I agree that probably the CMS is the media gallery from CMS entities are used much more, so that we should focus on that one first. Okay, and here the thing is that this filter looks to be quite complicated. I mean that from the acceptance criteria, we can see that the user should be able to filter first to be able to filter by the product, by the entity type of the CMS, like block, dynamic block page, and so on, but also by like a lot of their attributes, like enabled, disabled, name, store, customer segment.
Yeah.
For dynamic blocks, right? And yeah, and basically that's it. That's why it was really hard to understand how we can process that, like what conditions can we get in the result and how it will look on the front end, first of all. How this filter is going to look on the front end. Basically, I can imagine that selecting the blocks, like having the multi-select drop-down for blocks, pages, and then as trying to find the specific block by its name as a sub-item on this block selection, but it becomes more complicated as we add more attributes.
So I believe most of that attributes are shared. Like for example, there are differences between how we call blocks versus dynamic blocks. I believe one has label title, another has name, and one has ID, another doesn't have an ID. So, but more or less, these attributes, at least in the content area, very much aligned. So once you select like a type of the entity, the related attributes shouldn't change much.
No, but I mean, like in general, how they will be represented as part of the filters. Like we can open the filters, there is some space to add some options. Maybe like make it like the
So the easiest way,
similar to catalog product.
yeah,
form
the
category input.
From like the way how I imagine it, the easiest way would be to use the same kind of drop-down type that we have in, I believe, like in the page builder for the link type, when you can select the link type, like page, product, or just custom link, and based on that selection, other inputs changes and represent relevant attributes to filter that. So like I select, okay, I want to filter dynamic blocks. I select that type and relevant filters appear. But
oh, you mean appear in the
filter. In the filter.
In the same filter area or just additional filters?
In the same filter area. But that would be less functional because I wouldn't be able to select, let's say I want to filter images in dynamic blocks and blocks. And that would be ideal to be able to select, okay, I want to filter images in pages, dynamic blocks, and blocks, and don't want to see images in other areas. So like,
I think that
and if
yeah.
we,
Sorry, go ahead.
no,
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that what you just said there would be possible, like filter by entity type used in blocks, dynamic blocks or
mm-hmm.
pages. But I think complexity starts to um, happen when we have the subfilters that you were mentioning. So like by block name or by page name, and then if we have filters that depend on other filters to show up, that increases complexity, I suppose.
Yeah, and ideally we don't need to have that dependency. So name of the page can be just, it's not a drop down, it's just rather an input that I can, let's say I want to find images that are either in blocks, dynamic blocks or pages, and I remember that some of that entities are called, let's say, Black Friday. So I just insert Black Friday like a mask, and filtering happens within the area that is specified. And also,
Okay, so
sorry, and also like the store views, right? If it's possible to kind of disconnect that type of the field from certain entity, like for example CMS page or dynamic block, and I know that like from the technical perspective it might be challenging, so we can discuss that, because the way how we associate certain entity to the store view happens differently on dynamic blocks, for example, and pages. So maybe we can't align that type of the filter. So yeah, I mean, the goal is to make it as flexible as possible, and so that the fields are not dependent on the entity type that users selected. So these are just like flat lists of filters that as a user I can use, and they are not very much depend on each other, ideally.
okay, so do you mean the independent filters is a different filter in this area? Or it's still a separate area of filters with
What do you mean area?
this list? Well, I mean, we have the filter section on the grid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have 4 filters here. We will add the 5th filter that is, let's say, used in with dynamic blocks, pages, and the separate, and the 6th filter store view. That's the idea.
No,
Or
I think used in it's larger group of fields. It's not just one field. It's rather like a set of fields, because used in store views also applicable. So I can filter just, okay, I want to find images that are on my English store view, and don't specify the entity type. That would be ideal experience. So used in is applicable to page type, what is store view, their customer segment, and other field types that I mentioned in stories.
okay, so I guess then, what I imagine is, let's say that this is the our filter. This is blocks. I select blocks, and here under the blocks, the area expands, and I see store view filter, enable disabled filter, drop down, let's say, and the input for the name. Is that close to what the desired?
I mean, visually, maybe it's better to ask Eugene how it should look like.
Eugene?
So I have a simpler idea. Can I share my screen? It's not that universal, but it's much simpler.
We love simpler.
This is just a very quick mock-up. So basically, we will have maybe some sort of like a first component that you can select entities that's used, products categories, and it's a multi-select. And once you select that, it already applies the filter, so it shows all the images in products and categories, but it also adds two additional or whatever additional number of drop-downs needed to refine further by category or product if people want to do that. So it's additional filter. And maybe we can have additional filter for store views or whatever. So since that is a separate thing, right? We have entities like products, categories, CMS pages, blogs, dynamic blogs, and further kind of like those can be applied to store views or whatever. So that can be a separate control. And here you can select either all, or you can select as multi-select of individual stores, store views or whatever. So that can be, so again, two controls, but this control is a compound one that adds additional controls if you selected entities specific to that. What do you think, guys?
But the compound control can be really complex. Let's say if I select assets in blocks, then I need to show the drop down, let's say with the ID of the blocks or what.
So if you selected blocks here, there would be additional drop down appeared. And I think here you will select the blocks here.
I think that was the original kind of question from Sergey, that this compound filter can be really complex.
And also I'd like to say something that would cover, for example, select assets used on product A, B, and C, for example, that you would select on that select box there, but it wouldn't cover cases where it is described on the acceptance criteria, like if the block is enabled or block is disabled, and cover other attributes from those entities. So these selects would cover selecting specific entities, but wouldn't cover attributes from those entities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
sure.
So it gets a little bit more complex.
I agree. Definitely, this is more limited. However, again, I'm just saying, here's the simple solution that will mostly work for the majority of cases, right? Again, the first part, filtering by the entities itself, I think it's useful implementing even this one without each individual entity. And we can add individual ones, or we can even add drop downs for attributes, but that you understand, right? That would be even more complicated because it's actually a pair. You have to select the entity and then you have to select the value. So it gets even more complex, which we can go that route, of course, if we want to, if we have time or whatever. But I think if we just start with like the bigger chunk, again, select the entity, then you can refine by each entity, and then maybe you can refine even further by the attribute and value in that entity. I think that system kind of like would work, right? At least, again, if we lay it out in time. So we don't develop very complicated mechanism first, and that will cover all the cases, but it's gonna cost us a lot of time. And
I agree 100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's what I have. Sorry.
So my question is, can we avoid using the compound filter and have that filter, like all of the filters are available at the same time. So we don't hide filters based on their input type selected for their entity type.
I
Like,
think we can do that. It's still
so
gonna be
we have just
compound.
like flat list of filters, basically.
Yeah, it will be a lot more drop downs on the page. I don't
Yeah.
think that's a big deal, honestly. Like we definitely can do that. It's just like once you select each individual entity, I think the type of entity become useless, right? The filter with the type. So if you're filtering by product A and B, there's no point of selecting
Sure.
show me all
Yeah,
products.
but that's up
But it will work.
to user to kind of choose what they want to filter, whether they want to filter images that are used in product A, B, and C, or they would choose to use the filter that filter by all products, right? So they have all of the filters for them, and whatever they choose, we just apply that parameters and show the images. And if they choose like two filters that don't work together, there would be just like no results, basically.
Yeah, I think that will work. It's even simpler solution, right? It's just we don't need to have any dynamics. So yeah, it's gonna be a lot of drop downs though, but I don't think that's a problem, honestly. If again, this is collapsed section anyway, so
yeah. What do you guys think about flat list of filters?
So instead of one
Personally,
complex, yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, personally, I agree with the idea to have a flat list of filters, but it would be much better if this list would be placed not in horizontal, not in a line, but like an Adobe Stock service at the left column. I do not know if it's possible, but it will be much more easier to filter out the content.
You mean
That's
like on a side? Not
yeah,
in this.
yeah, on a side. Yeah, on a
but
side.
that will
But
change.
it's yeah, sorry. Let me just finish this idea. Yeah, because if we will have a lot of filters, imagine that you press the filter button and you will have a list of those filters, and then you click apply, and again you will see just a very huge panel up to your image board, and it will be not so maybe useful. Maybe it's time to create a vertical panel with the filters because yeah, the flat filters are good, but with the current filter panel, maybe it's not so user friendly. It's just from my point of view.
yeah, I agree. But that if you think about that design, that basically on a higher level than we're working right now, right? We're working on each adding individual filters, and this is work actually changing how filters work in general. Well, let's say just for this slide out panel, right? But still, we need to redesign the whole section, which again, there is a pattern like that. On the side, you can have filters. We already have it on the storefront, and it's actually in a Adobe Spectrum design language. They have a pattern like that. But again, it's up to Elena if she wants to kind of sanction that amount of work additional.
I mean, unfortunately, nothing is easy with Magento, and what we have is just an implication of grid that used not only in Media Gallery, but also in other places, and we use the same kind of pattern for filtering in that grid that, let's say, in grids with products or other grids that we have, and changing that pattern would require changing this pattern in other grids. Otherwise, you all guys know that we have like how many types of grids we have in Magento, and with that idea we just introduce kind of another variation.
But maybe not grid. Sorry to interrupt you, but maybe not grid and create a new UI component for filters, because grid, in any case, is just the receiver of information, of data. So when, for example, you click apply, if I understand this mechanism correctly, so when you click apply, you say to Magento that Magento apply this amount on filters and select this data from database. So, and maybe if we can say to do the same thing to Magento from another UI component, just we will be great. But yeah, I understand your point, but just want to suggest an idea. If we implemented the Masonry grid, so maybe we can implement a new filter for grids. I think
well, that sounds to me like a new team for admin panel. That's basically don't need to change even components. The UI should be changed, and that's an idea for an admin panel team. Like
for sure.
Yeah, only new UI component which I'll just say to grid to get new data. I think it's possible, but again, it's just only an idea. Yeah, if help will be needed, I'm ready.
So the question is, like, if you are a product owner and you decide what is more important, to introduce new filters, like filter by area of usage of assets, or new representation of filter, what would you choose?
Can you please repeat your question one more time?
Yeah, I'm just putting you in my shoes and would like to hear your opinion as a product owner. So if you have two ideas, filter assets by the area where they used in, or new representation of filtering, like side filter, instead of the panel filter.
Yeah, so in this case, I would choose next way. So firstly, implement the filters as it is, as we now have with this grid panel filter functionality. And then the next milestone, implement a new filters. So this is only the right way, because yeah, you're totally right that we will have to do a lot of changes, and this will take maybe 2 decades to implement this stuff, to test this stuff, to approve in architect
2 decades of what? What do you mean 2 decades? Don't scare me. 20 years?
No, sorry. Sorry for my mistake. Yeah, no, just we need maybe 6 months just for new filter functionality. I mean, just new filter panel. It's so pessimistic scenario. Oh, yeah, optimistic at 3 months from my point of view, right? But this can be done after providing the first part of functionality.
Yeah, I agree with that approach. So let's do like functional changes first, and if we have Sergey still available to process other improvements to grid, we can improve the filter as well.
Right? I think filters is a Magento feature, right? It's available on all the grids. So the feature request to Magento 2, not to Adobe Stock Integration project, would be great.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, as for filters, if we are going to use only simple filters and display them all at once, then probably we need a list of simple filters with the options, or just the description of options that we have. Also, in this case, the name filter, the question to the name filter, like if we are searching the block, select blocks, for example, filter that Eugene was showing on his mockups. Is it going to have, are we going to provide the after suggest or just list? Or just the input for the block name search?
No,
Ideally, input.
Just input.
Sorry, with autocomplete if possible. Eugene,
No,
sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Yeah, for the how it works in Page Builder, for example, we have, when you open the dropdown, we show you either the full list of entities available in case of categories, for example, or CMS pages, or we show you the search for products because there's so much products, right? We don't show you any products and you can search by name, but then you select the entity. It shows you the actual entities that we found in the database and you select each one. So it's not, you're not just typing any name. You have to select each entity individually, but we give you the kind of the search and refine in that. So if you can open the page builder, I can show you, or I actually, I can.
Do you know,
So
is
it's like
it
an
a page?
autocomplete, right?
Yeah, it's an autocomplete feature. So for example, here I have this, you see button link. We will not have this compound. It will just only have like select whatever. And you see CMS pages I have here already. I can search for them, of course. And it selects the each one individually. But for products, we're not showing you the all products, but I can select, I can filter, I'm sorry, I can search and it shows me entities and I can select like that. So it's a asynchronous kind of like way of selecting entities.
Eugene, do you know by any chance this component, this field type, is it introduced in Page Builder or is it available in Magento out of the box?
Available in Magento. No, it's available in Magento.
Okay.
Yeah,
It was
we
developed
built
in
this as
Page
a
Builder
UI
and delivered
component.
it?
Yeah, it's a core component.
Oh, nice.
That was the
Then
idea, that
I
we
have a
build
question.
something in Page Builder. Yeah.
Oh, no, please finish your thought.
I was just saying that all of the new input types that created by Page Builder team delivered as UI components into Magento library and available for all third-party developers to use in their extensions or custom modules.
Yeah, I don't know how you find it. Like, is it a URL input element, link it element, or whatever? But yeah, it's definitely a component and it should be available.
Okay, we'll check that. Good, that's really cool. Then I guess we need to update the story with the list of filters, and yeah, we'll need to reassess it a bit.
So
I also have a question about filters. Sorry, but it's a good time to ask this question. So I saw in the mock-up that we will need to filter our information per store. Am I correct with this?
store views, because
Store views.
the entities assigned to store views.
Yeah, great. So then I have a question to Sergey, because you know this issue inside out. I mean, the content part of Enhanced Media Gallery. So as I understood, now we do not have, we do not store this relation. We store only, for example, content or asset content relation, but we are not able to simply get the store view relation. Am I right with this or not?
I guess no, we are able to find out which store view the page or block is assigned to.
Yeah, so we can use this. I thought about storing this store view part. Yeah, but now
No, so
yeah,
you're right. Store view is not part of the content identity for us, but for storing the relations. But yeah, it doesn't limit us from filtering.
Yeah, great. Can you please create a separate issue for this, because I see here a lot of maybe tricky things.
Well,
So just
that's
to create a filter for store views.
I think it will be a separate task, yeah. But that's basically an attribute that it should be treated the same way as any other attribute from my point of view.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, do not have any other questions.
Okay, good. I think it's a bit more clear now with the filtering. Let me check other stories that raised some questions. Oh yeah, by the way, so right now the filtering looks a bit more clear and simple, but there is a story to display the detailed information on the Justin entities on the view details panel. So right now we are displaying like number of pages, number of blocks, number of products the asset is used in, and we are going to display more information on those entities. Let me find the story. Yeah, I guess user sees the entities where asset is used in. So title, URL, key, status, store, view, and I guess a link as well. That's.
You mean like to navigate to the page?
Yes. That's the last part of the sentence where the user can open each entity.
Yeah. But I guess we can associate link with like title or whatever on UI. It shouldn't be a separate like link text.
Yeah, anyway, I guess I'm logged out from this instance now. Still, there is not too much place on view details panel. It will be interesting to take a look or to have a design for that one. Like how we can put all this information, considering that the image can be used on several blocks, pages.
Eugene is gonna have a challenging task, I assume.
Yeah, so somewhere here. Let's see if we have Adobe Stock image here. Licensed.
Eugene, do you have any ideas?
So Adobe Stock information, and it's not used in, but yeah, if it was used in, we'll just have one line here, like used in, and 4 lines maximum. But it looks like we have to introduce a new block.
New group.
Yeah, new block, new group with that detailed information. Did I open that story?
Can I share my screen really quickly?
Yes.
Again, trying to keep extremely simple. So we're referring to this section, right? I propose remove this section and introduce like a kind of new group, and basically it will show you more detailed, kind of like it will group entities per group. It will show you the number, let's pages, to, home, whatever, products, that will be categories, CMS blocks, just as a simple kind of like first step that we can do this. Maybe later we can introduce kind of links here, so you can click and go to that actual entity. I don't know how that's gonna work. Look like. I just think that it's useful to have just groups of entities and each individual entity displayed like here. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, it's good, but we also have other attributes in the user story that we want to show alongside with the page name. And the question is how to place these attributes in this narrow column.
Well, if there's gonna be a lot, then maybe we have some sort of like a model window. I don't
It's not
think
a lot. So I have this story. It's like 3 or 4 attributes.
we can try
Actually,
to squeeze
can
a
you
table here, like a small table. Yeah, can you show me the story? I don't have a link right now. We possibly can just squeeze a tiny table there and show uh, in first column there would be a name of the entity, like homepage, another homepage, and there will be attributes in the table. Okay, yeah, it's gonna be more than that. Um, Perhaps if we want to go that way, like we can have some sort of a model window for each entity type that's going to show you the new model with the table with that information, right? So it will going to pull up the data grid that we have right now, full data grid with those attributes as columns, and it will be basically you will see only pages, blocks, or dynamic blocks one at a time. Because yeah, it's gonna be a mess if we're gonna put everything in one model with the details. That's gonna be a lot of information. Uh, so we can have some sort of a link. We can still use my design with the groups. Let me show you. Uh, we can still use this design, but we can have like a link or some button that will invoke the model for pages, products, or whatever you have, and that will show you the model with the full data grid. What do you think?
Model, you
definitely
mean
complicated solution.
slide panel? One more
No, like pop-up,
addition.
I understand.
Yeah, some sort of a slider panel pop-up with the data grid inside.
Well, from my point of view, if we're going to display the detailed information on slide panel, then why wouldn't we leave the basic used in block as it is right now, just displaying the number of pages? If anyway clicking on used in, you will get the detailed information. Because there can be like, the image can be used on 100 products, and oh yeah, with the show more, it will probably fix it for the beginning, but if you click show more, it will display you 100 lines in this block, and that is going to be.
So you're thinking about this case, right?
Well, I thought about one entry point to the slide panel, because we are not going to have separate
But then you
for
have to
products and
have
pages.
like a separate data grids for each entity type in that model. Well, that's totally doable, but it's kind of like more complicated because user has to scroll through different data grids. Imagine like first data grid would be, let's say, products. That's going to be a long scroll probably. Then it's going to be pages. I suggest show them only data grid for the entity type they choose to, because that data grid itself it's a huge component, right? And it can have, first of all, it can have multiple lines. It also has controls for pagination, for, I don't know, maybe filtering search if we want to add that. But it's a component that we can use, right? So we can, yes, we can put them all in one page. We can even put them here on this slider panel. At the bottom of the slider panel, we can dedicate the bottom of the slider panel. It will be basically infinite, right? It will have the grid, but that's gonna be a long scroll basically. How does multiple data grids would work if there's gonna be like thousands of entities or whatever? Are we gonna paginate them? In that case, how the pagination will work, right? If let's say we show, I don't know, 20 elements on one side, and we just say next page will show another 20. That's kind of weird, you know. We don't have this much examples like that in admin, but definitely we can try to do that. I'm not see the problem with that. It's just like I think model is a little bit better because again it scopes user to the whatever he wants to know. If he wants to dive deep into the products that this image is associated with, he can go that route. I don't have a solution for that, right? I'm trying to say I don't have a preference whether it should be all in one page, a lot of information on one page, and possibly some weird UI issues again with pagination or whatever, or it's just scoped. I think scoped is easier, but again, we lose kind of like the ability to see information at a glance, right? We will not see, oh, I see pages, products, and etc. at one spot. But again, if there's going to be a lot of entities like products, you will still can't do that, right? We can't fit everything in one page. So we can have this control just shows the numbers and with detailed explanation. We can have more expanded view with, let's say, name, and you can expand even more. Or we can show everything. We can dump the information here somewhere. We have space at the bottom, so you will scroll and you will see a lot of information there. Possibly redundant because I don't think people would need to go that deep when they see just the details, but we can definitely explore that route as well.
I have an idea.
So this information
that is. Oh, yeah, sorry. So an idea that probably will bring more complexity and more work, but I think that it's very useful. So instead of trying to add even more complexity to the interface of the media gallery, probably we can add the filter to the product grid that will be able to filter product by assets, by media assets, and then show more link will lead to the product grid with the applied filter of the asset.
It sounds weird, but I like this idea because let's think about the workflow of somebody who uses this thing, right? You said this image can be associated with, let's say, thousands of products. So realistically, I don't think anybody would expect to see this information here. But if we can open this view in a separate tab and basically filter the data grid by this asset, filter the products grid that use this asset. Now I have a specific view dedicated for that asset. So now I can work with that asset. I can associate that asset with another product, or I can de-associate that asset or whatever. And I have an updated view. If I just reload that tab, it will update the view and it will show me always relevant data that I don't need to go into some weird slide out panel and show more, and it will show me the model or find this information here, scroll through the entities. I will just have a dedicated tab open for that. I think that will work better, honestly. It is a little bit weird, like having some sort of a new window open with specifically filtered by this entity, and we will probably not have a UI for the product grid to filter by specific entity unless we want it. We can definitely develop such thing, right? We can add a filter on the product grid that lets you select the asset and filter the products that use the asset, but I don't think it's needed, honestly.
Well, that's the filter we are going to use to display that view. Like, yes, anyway, to display the grid, even in this interface, I guess it would be good for us to use the product grid or just to create the new grid with the products. And basically, even without the UI, the same filter will need to be added on the backend at least.
I think you guys are talking about kind of the same thing. I don't know. At least that sounds to me. So we are not going to enable filtering by asset on a product grid in Magento admin, but from the media gallery, when user views the asset, we will use product grid and kind of have this filtering by asset implemented behind the scene, applied when user clicks like show more where this asset used on products, and we use the product grid, I don't know, in a separate tab somewhere, but we don't build that interface ourselves. We just use whatever grid we already have for products and filter that grid by the asset. I think that that's meaningful.
Why do you think we should hide the filter from the user, by the way? Like if we'll have the implementation for that filter, why wouldn't we show it?
But that would require a UI, like filter UI. Basically, we need to have an asset selector. We need to integrate the media gallery to the product grid, and no one asked for that feature. And that feature requires work. It's not free.
Well, I guess just rendering the field for this filter on front end is not the most complex part of this task. But yeah.
I mean, still work.
If it's not,
right?
So is it just the work limitation that, like scope limitation? We are not displaying it because it's bigger scopes. There are no other concerns about it, right?
I mean, I don't think it's a valid use case from the product grid. I mean, at least I haven't heard about such feature requests from anyone, that kind of people want filter products by the asset used in that product. That sounds kind of weird.
Okay,
And
I'm just
I don't
from
want
the scope.
to invest in something that no one wants and need. That's only the reason.
I'm not 100% sure, Lena, but I'm just, I think that the scope of work will be that we'll have to implement that filter to use it and then put additional work to hide it from the product grid, not other way
Okay.
around.
I thought that we just have that filtering functionality, but we don't need to build UI, because like we don't need that filter type on product grid UI. We just need the logic, right? But UI we don't need.
Okay, but if it will be easier to display the filter, will it be an option?
Yeah, why not? We
Yeah,
have a
I'm also
configurable grid where people can kind of hide filters. So
I'm just
have
afraid.
The standard functionality that can hide filters, basically.
Yeah, we had that kind of hidden filters on Adobe Stock Integration. I do remember that there are a lot of scenarios to be considered, because we want to display this filter partially, but partially hide it. Like when we show these products in the grid, we still need to display the active filter that we are filtering by assets, because it's applied for user to be able to drop it. But we are not displaying it in the filter section, and that makes a custom approach that first of all, probably requires some attention for the complexity from grid configuration point of view. Second, may lead to some unexpected behavior, because that's not the usual case with the filters, right?
I'm not opposed on having like additional filter on product grid, but if it requires extra effort to put it there, don't do it. If we need to build it anyway and put an extra effort to hide it, also don't hide it.
Okay, yeah, I got your point.
Yeah.
So just to reiterate, the flow would be something like this. Hide it. So we will have the section used in, and we will have the numbers, and then we will, within each number, we will have a link that will open a new tab with the data grid and with the applied filter.
Mhm.
And we will have some sort of a, possibly again, if that's the case, we will have some sort of a UI selector for the asset. So user can not only clear the filter, but they can select the asset. And I don't know how that's gonna look like. Well, honestly, like, is that gonna be like just a search with autocomplete of all the assets, or we will open a new media gallery instance when you select the asset?
Yeah, that was my fear, that we need to integrate a media gallery to the product grid, and that doesn't sound easy.
No, I thought it will be just an input with the asset name.
Oh, okay, then it works.
Can we at least have a autocomplete that I showed you with page builder? So basically, we will.
But we need to show with the autocomplete at least some of the asset preview, right? Like a thumbnail.
Yeah, yeah, but then
That's an
So
addition.
it's not exactly the same autocomplete.
So basically, you can just search by asset name, I guess. And yeah, we will pull the list of names from a database and you can, yeah, select it. Well, maybe we can add a thumbnail here. That would be great if we can just add a small
Okay,
thumbnail next to the name.
explore the cheapest option.
Yeah, that would be great if we here we can add some sort of a thumbnail at least. So keep this UI.
Otherwise it's just like
Yeah, it's gonna be weird.
it would be like a button, feel like it.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that will work. Again, I like the idea of having a specific page for asset details information, not hide it inside this detail page or whatever. So users can, can go back to this. So I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, basically we are reusing existing interface instead of building a lot of variants of it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, we are a bit out of time. That was a productive meeting, but if you have another 10 minutes, there is a last question for the last story.
I have.
Okay, good. So just to confirm, the deleting bulk functionality, the deleting bulk stories. Did we agree to add the checkboxes to each image and have separate selection for adding images to the content? Where you can select only one image by clicking on it, and checkboxes for deleting an image? Or like what was the desired behavior on the front end for bulk deletion? Or mass actions multi-select?
There should be some action that users specifically call for that enables that multi-select. And obviously when that mode is enabled, selecting, adding asset into the content not possible. And only like image manipulations possible in that kind of mode.
No, we have a mockup for that.
Well,
I didn't find it, to be honest.
Yes, sorry. It's been a while since I updated it. I need to, but again, this is an idea. So we can add this hover checkbox. So if you click specifically here, it will trigger that mode of, first of all, it will select the asset like this, not with the ring. And it will have kind of this control here, and the actions probably would appear. So you can now take actions with it. But again, I haven't thought this through. This is not a real prototype. It's just like an example of how can this be achieved. I agree with Elena. It's a little bit fishy because we're mixing different selections on a one interface, right? We're selecting. Users supposed to select a single asset and then proceed with add it to the page. But now we're kind of like allowing edit assets. It's a little bit weird. My proposal, maybe we have this functionality of selecting multiple assets and making actions with them only on a standalone media grid, right? We have like the page called media gallery, right? User can navigate and manage the media gallery. So maybe we will have this mode of selecting multiple assets and doing actions with them there only. And for in-context media gallery that people use to select, it will be single select and people can only add selected image and they can't delete. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we had a discussion about like what differences should media gallery have between like in context mode and like separate dedicated page mode, and we agreed that like as little differences as possible, so it's more unified behavior. I think you were the one who was very for that idea.
Well, it makes sense, like from a development perspective, right? We don't want to introduce like a new type of media gallery, but
Yeah.
from a user perspective, I don't think we're adding much value of managing the images in bulk while you're in context mode, because like, yes, it's convenient, but then we're we're changing the convenience in one place to complete inconvenience in the other place, because you can mess up very quickly. If you're not paying attention to what you're doing, you can quickly mess up your data. While you're in context, you can actually delete a bunch of images, and there will be like select all button and unreversible action of deleting. I don't know. It feels a little bit weird have this in context, but we can definitely pursue that. It's just like, do we want to do that? I'm not sure.
I think we need to explore the option, kind of in what would be the kind of interface for user to enable that mass action mode, and if we can communicate like what is that and how it works. I don't see any harm of having that functionality available anywhere, because like as a user you might have that experience when you're like trying to insert the image, you started filtering, finding something, but then you get just kind of distracted by finding some assets that you actually don't need, and you decided to clean up a bit, but oh wait, it's not possible here, I need to go somewhere else, and it's like, wow.
I agree with you. Yeah, it's definitely like it will be great. So maybe we can have some sort of a button somewhere, I don't know, that triggers this mode. And once you're in that
Yeah.
mode, you will see the checkboxes,
Yeah.
and you can only do the checkbox thing, I guess.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying maybe you can like spend some time exploring
Yeah.
like what can trigger that mode, and if you find a reasonable solution, we can use that. If you don't find it, then like as a plan B, we can go with the option you proposed to have that only on a dedicated page.
Yeah, I think we can try to pull this off, though. I would want us to basically enter a specific mode for this component from this slider panel where you can click some button, and now this button bar is gone, and it will be just a button called delete selected or something like that, or cancel. So basically another slider panel. But yeah, let me explore that. I agree, it's worth thinking over. I haven't done that much thinking on this.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Eugen, can you please update the mockups, and if you can publish the mockup that you showed, that you created today during the meeting, as well?
Yeah, I
so
will
we can
update
use
it.
them.
Yeah, you will have a link.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Then I guess we can continue continue the discussion about the deletes in bulk, like summarize it on the next meeting next week. Would it be okay? Okay, then thanks a lot. Very productive meeting, a lot of cool decisions, I think, and discussions. We are moving forward in our planning of the next milestone. Looking forward to see the mockups and add them to the stories, and see you guys on the next meeting. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Bye bye.